It began, as so many strange things do, with the weather. I was in my small terraced house in southern England, nursing a lukewarm cup of tea and watching the world dissolve. The Thames Valley is no stranger to a morning mist, a gentle, silvery blanket that softens the edges of the world, making the familiar pastoral and the mundane mysterious. It's a painterly fog, one that poets write about. It kisses the windows and is gone by mid-morning. This was not that fog. This was a solid thing, rolling in not like mist, but like a silent, grey tsunami. It came from the direction of the river, a churning, opaque wall that seemed to erase the normally picturesque view entirely. One moment, I was looking at Mrs. Higgins's prize-winning roses across the street. Their vibrant reds and pinks, a cheerful defiance of the encroaching autumn. The next, there was only a flat, featureless grey wall, where her house, her garden, her entire existence should be. It moved with an ungodly speed, swallowing the street, the lampposts, the very sky, in a matter of minutes. The most unsettling part, by far, was the silence. Fogs usually muffle sound, creating a feeling of cosy isolation. This one seemed to consume it. The distant hum of traffic on the nearby main road, the cheerful chirping of the sparrows that nested in the eaves of my roof, the very thrum of life itself, all gone. It was a profound and absolute silence, the kind you might find at the bottom of the ocean. My world had shrunk to the four walls of my house, and the silence became overwhelming. I found myself standing in the middle of my living room, straining to hear something, anything. The rhythmic tick of the grandfather clock in the hall had become a thunderous, solitary drumbeat in the void. I turned on the television, the sudden blast of a car commercial making me flinch. I needed to hear a human voice, even if it was just an actor extolling the virtues of a new hatchback. I left it on, a babbling electronic talisman against the unnerving quiet. That's when the first alert came through. It wasn't on the TV, which was still cheerfully advertising holiday packages to Spain. It was a push notification on my phone, accompanied by the jarring, high-pitched tone reserved for national emergencies. A sound designed to cut through sleep, conversation, and complacency. National Weather Service alert, issued 9:45 BST. Effects: Thames Valley and surrounding areas. Message: an unprecedented dense fog advisory is now in effect. The atmospheric phenomenon is characterized by unusually rapid formation and extreme density, with visibility reduced to near zero. The fog is currently stationary. All residents are advised to remain indoors. Do not attempt to travel by vehicle or on foot. The risk of spatial disorientation is significant. Spatial disorientation, I muttered, the words feeling dry in my mouth. I peered out the window at the impenetrable grey. No kidding. It was unnerving, certainly, but it still felt like a problem for weathermen and the traffic police. An extreme, but ultimately natural, event. I did a quick mental inventory. Plenty of food in the cupboards, a good book I'd been meaning to finish. I could wait it out. I made another cup of tea and tried to settle on the sofa. But the silence was a persistent distraction. A hungry entity that the television couldn't quite repel. The house, usually my sanctuary, was beginning to feel like a cage. Every creak of the floorboards upstairs, every gurgle of the pipes, was magnified. It felt alien somehow. I was on edge, a primal fear of being cut off, of being isolated in a way that felt profoundly unnatural. Hours passed. The grey outside didn't lighten, shift, or thin. It was as though the world had been paused, dipped in wet concrete, and left to dry. The central heating clicked on, with a loud whoomph and a clank, and I jumped so violently I sloshed hot tea onto my hand. Cursing, I ran it under the cold tap in the kitchen, trying to ignore my ever-increasing heart rate. As I stood there, staring out the small kitchen window at the same blank nothingness, I heard a sound. It was a strange thump. It sounded even more pronounced in the silence. It was coming from the back garden. It sounded like a football, bouncing slowly and deliberately on the paving stones of the patio. A child's ball. But the Joneses next door were on holiday in Greece, their house empty and dark. And no child could be out in this. I listened, holding my breath. After a couple more thumps, it stopped. I strained my ears, but all I could hear was the TV in the background. I shook my head, dismissing it. I tended to have an overactive imagination anyway. This situation must have just been making it worse. I went back to the living room, but the feeling of being watched, of being listened to, was now firmly entrenched. I kept glancing up from my book, my eyes darting to the windows, half expecting to see a face pressed against the glass. Then came the second alert. The tone was the same, a shrill digital scream, but the issuing authority was different. This was the one that planted the first real seed of ice in my stomach. Thames Valley Police Alert. Issued 14:20 BST. Effects: all residents under dense fog advisory. Message: we're receiving a high volume of reports concerning auditory phenomena from within the fog bank. These claims are currently unconfirmed and may be related to the unusual atmospheric conditions. As a precautionary measure, all residents are advised to close and secure all windows and doors. Muffle any exterior noise where possible. Do not attempt to locate the source of any sounds you may hear outside your property. Repeat, do not investigate any sounds. Auditory phenomena. The phrase was so sterile, so clinical. It did nothing to capture the terrified feeling that was beginning to wash over me. The bouncing ball. Had other people heard things? The alert was deliberately vague, but my mind started to fill in the blanks with horrifying possibilities. What if someone needed help out there? Or worse, criminals might be trying to take advantage of this odd situation. The instruction to muffle exterior noise was the strangest part. Were they trying to keep something out? Or keep us from hearing something we shouldn't? My mind immediately sprang to hiding from a predator, like prey in the woods. I followed the instructions without a second thought. I went from room to room checking the latches on the windows, pushing them tight against their seals. I pulled the thickest curtains I had, the heavy velvet ones in the living room, plunging the house into a dim, artificial twilight. I even rolled up a towel and wedged it against the bottom of the front door, my hands trembling slightly. The silence returned. I was sitting in the dark, in the quiet, waiting. For what? I didn't know. That's when I heard something. It sounded familiar. A voice, muffled by the fog and the door. It was my mother's voice. "Alex? Alex, love, can you hear me?" I froze, every muscle in my body locking tight. My blood turned to a slush of ice. My mother lived 300 miles away in York. She was 72, had a bad hip, and hadn't driven in 5 years. There was no conceivable, logical, possible reason for her to be outside my front door. "I got turned around in this awful fog," her voice called out, closer now, laced with that familiar, fretful tone she used when she was flustered. "My phone's dead. Can't you let me in, darling? I'm freezing out here." It felt as though there was a frantic bird trapped in my chest. It was her. The cadence, the specific way she called me darling. It was perfect. A wave of panic and concern washed over me, momentarily eclipsing the police warning. My mum was out there, lost and cold. The instinct to run to the door, to throw it open and pull her into the warmth, was a physical force. A tidal wave of love and duty. I stood up, my body moving before my brain could catch up. I took a step towards the hallway, my hand outstretched towards the door handle. "Do not investigate any sounds." The words from the alert flashed in my mind, a cold, sharp counterpoint to the warm, desperate pull of my mother's voice. It couldn't be her. It was impossible. A hallucination. A trick of the atmosphere, just like the police said. "Alex, please. I can hear you moving in there. Don't be silly. Open the door." The voice was pleading now, a note of raw panic creeping in. It sounded so real. So utterly, heartbreakingly real. It scraped at my soul. I backed away from the door. My hands clapped over my ears, shaking my head. "You're not real," I whispered, the words feeling flimsy and absurd against the sheer conviction in her voice. "You're not my mum." "Of course I'm your mum," the voice sobbed, the sound of it tearing at my insides. "Who else would I be? I'm scared, Alex. I saw your light on. I thought I was safe. Please." I stumbled back into the living room, my eyes wide with terror. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew, with a certainty that defied all logic and emotion, that opening that door would be the last thing I ever did. The sobs from outside continued, punctuated by desperate pleas. It was a symphony of my deepest fears and protective instincts, weaponized against me. It knew exactly where to strike. "Do you remember when you were little, at the beach in Cornwall?" the voice continued, its tone shifting, becoming softer and more intimate. "You ran off after a kite and you got lost in the dunes. You were so scared. But I found you. I always find you, Alex. I'm here now. Just let me in." A memory so specific, so personal. It staggered me. I could almost feel the scratchy wool of the blanket she wrapped me in, smell the salt on her coat. How could it know that? I was on the verge of breaking. My mind was a battlefield. Logic screamed that it was a trap, while my heart screamed that I was abandoning my mother to die on my doorstep. What if the police were wrong? What if, by some bizarre, 1,000,000 to 1 chance it really was her. Could I live with myself if I left her out there? Then, my phone announced its alert tone again. I snatched it with a shaking hand, my eyes blurring the text as I read. Ministry of Defence alert. Urgent. National security threat. Issued 16:55 BST. Affects all UK citizens. Message: cease all current activity. Read this message now in its entirety. The atmospheric phenomenon is not a weather event. It is a mimetic entity. Repeat, it is mimetic. The voices you're hearing are a lure. It is learning. It is replicating the voices of your family, your friends, your children. These voices are not real. Do not respond. Do not engage. Do not open your door for any reason. Your life depends on your absolute compliance. This is not a drill. The phone slipped from my numb fingers and clattered to the floor. I couldn't believe it. This all felt like some bizarre dream. It felt like something from a horror movie. I was right. This was a predator. The moment the alert registered in my mind, the crying outside my door stopped, abruptly, as if a switch had been flicked. The silence that followed was somehow more terrifying than the sound had been. It knew. It knew I'd seen the alert. It knew its cover was blown. The game had changed. I scrambled backwards on my hands and knees, away from the door. My house was no longer a sanctuary. It was a besieged fortress, and the enemy was at the gate, wearing the face of my mother. The siege began in earnest. After a few minutes of dreadful silence, a new voice started. It was my best friend, Mark. Not pleading, but jovial, laced with the easy sarcasm we'd shared for 20 years. "Alex, you in there, mate? The roads are a nightmare. Thought I'd check you hadn't floated away." A short, familiar laugh. "Come on, open up. I brought biscuits, the good ones with the chocolate chunks." I huddled in the centre of my living room, as far from the walls as I could get, rocking back and forth. I squeezed my eyes shut, but I couldn't block out the sounds. The voice was perfect. It had his laugh down, the slight lilt he had in his voice when he was tired. "Seriously, man, what gives?" The voice sharpened, the friendly tone evaporating. "I can hear you breathing. I drove all the way from Birmingham in this crap. The least you can do is open the door. Some friend you are." It brought up things only we would know. The time we crashed my dad's car into a hedge and tried to fix it with duct tape. The name of my first crush in primary school. The stupid drunken pact we'd made on graduation night to be each other's best man. It was a relentless, surgical assault on my memories, designed to prove its authenticity, to make me doubt the MOD alert. When Mark's voice faded, unanswered, it was replaced by Sarah's. A girl I'd dated for 2 years, a relationship that had ended messily, full of regrets. Her voice was gentle, full of the warmth I remembered so fondly, a sound that had once been my home. "Alex, it's me. I was so worried. I know we didn't end on the best terms, but I never stopped caring about you. I just had this awful feeling. Please, just let me see you're okay. That's all I ask." It was psychological warfare of the highest order. It cycled through the people I loved, the people I trusted, the people whose voices were etched into the very fabric of my being. It used affection, then anger, then guilt, then fear. It found every emotional vulnerability I had and exploited it with ruthless, intelligent precision. Then, it did something new. Something truly monstrous. I heard the voice of my father. My father died of a heart attack 7 years ago. It was the most painful experience of my entire life. His voice wasn't outside the door. It was inside my head now. A low, disappointed rumble that I felt in my bones. Alexander, I didn't raise a coward. A man protects his family. Your mother was just out here, crying her eyes out, and you did nothing. You sat in here and let her suffer. What's gotten into you, son? That broke me. Tears streamed down my face, hot and silent. To hear that voice, stolen from the grave and twisted into a tool of condemnation, was a violation beyond words. It was desecration. I wanted to scream at it, to tell it to shut up, to defile his memory. But the alert had been clear. I couldn't respond to whatever this thing was, or I'd be in mortal danger. Then, the voices started to combine. It was a cacophony of my life's most important people, all clamouring for my attention, for my betrayal of my own survival instinct. "Let us in, Alex," my mother's voice pleaded, sounding thin and weak. "It's so cold out here," Mark's voice shivered, a theatrical chatter of teeth. "I'm so sorry. I forgive you," Sarah's voice whispered, full of false reconciliation. "Don't be a disappointment," my father's voice commanded, a stern, ghostly echo. They spoke over each other, a chorus of phantoms at my door, begging for entry. Then came the other sounds. A wet, tearing sound, like fabric being ripped, followed by a perfect imitation of my mother's scream of agony. "It's got me, Alex! For God's sake, help me!" I screamed, a raw, animal sound of terror. I clapped my hands over my ears, but the sounds were inside my head now. It was playing out my worst nightmares on the other side of the door. It followed with the sound of a sickening, heavy crunch, and Mark's voice crying out, cut short with a gurgle. It was torturing them, killing them, one by one, all because I wouldn't turn the lock. I knew it wasn't real. The alert had told me. But the primal, lizard part of my brain, the part that loves and fears, screamed that it was. The sounds were too perfect. The pain in their voices too genuine. It created a purely auditory illusion of a massacre on my doorstep. The sun must have set, because the gloom in the house deepened into true darkness. I didn't dare turn on a light. I crawled under the dining table, curling into a ball, a trembling, weeping mess. The thing outside my house wore the faces of my loved ones and performed their executions for my benefit. It was a predator that didn't just kill its prey, it dismantled its soul first. After what felt like a lifetime, the voices and the horrific sound effects stopped. The silence, when it finally fell, was a physical relief, but it brought no comfort. The absence of the voices was just a different kind of terror. A waiting terror. I stayed where I was, too afraid to move. Every nerve ending raw and screaming. My throat was parched, my bladder ached, but the thought of moving, of making a sound, was paralysing. The silence stretched on for hours. My phone lay on the floor, its screen dark. No more alerts, no more information. Was it over? Or was it just listening, waiting for me to make a mistake? I was alone in the dark, with the knowledge of the monster that was patiently waiting outside. I must have drifted into a state of shock-induced stupor, my mind blessedly blank. I was startled back to full, horrifying consciousness by a familiar sound. The high-pitched, piercing tone of an emergency alert. It blared from my phone, making me flinch violently. The sound was a beacon of hope in the terrifying darkness. Another message. More instructions. Proof that the government, the army, someone was still out there, fighting this thing. We weren't all dead. The tone blared for a full 10 seconds, a sound that had become both a terror and a comfort. Then, it cut off. Not with the usual click of a completed broadcast, but as though the wire had been snipped midstream. A moment of perfect, absolute silence hung in the air. I strained my ears, listening for anything, for the telltale start of a voice. A voice came, but it wasn't anything I was expecting. It wasn't from the front door. It wasn't from the back of the house. It was from the living room window, right beside the sofa, only a few feet from where I was hiding under the table. It was so close, it felt like it was in the room with me. It was a voice I knew better than any other in the world. A voice I heard every time I spoke, every time I thought. It was my own. Calm, reasonable, soothing. A quiet whisper against the glass. "It's okay," my voice said. "You can let me in now."